I'm going to just talk about another industry that deserves better and tie in the government's budget, allocations that are in the budget to do certain work which will drive policy outcomes. Now, I'm the shadow for small business, and small businesses, everyone says it in lots of different ways, the lifeblood of Tasmania. Of the almost 41,000 small business, or 41,000 businesses in Tasmania, 97% of them are classified as small. But what I think people forget, and I'm hoping that the Minister hears this, is that small businesses are all types of businesses. And when you look at the government's own interim business growth strategy, it identifies that agriculture, forestry and fishing is the second largest industry sector by number of businesses in Tasmania. Obviously, I'm across agriculture and fishing, our shadow treasurer across forestry. But in the fishing sector, we talk about small businesses being the backbone of the Tasmanian economy. Well, in the wild fisheries, we talk about Rock Lobster being the backbone of the wild fisheries sector. And right now, as a result of a budget impact which is going to drive a policy, this government, who says that they're, and I'm just going to pick up this document again because I can't believe it, so I can't ever remember what it is, says that they're strengthening the future, delivering for all Tasmanians, is going to seemingly make a decision that is going to collapse the local fishing fleet in the Rock Lobster Fishery. Now, I got a letter recently from the Mayor of Breakaday. He has been for many, many years a commercial fisherman in his own right, so he gets this. So I'm going to just read in a little bit of the comments that he makes about connecting up, just in case anyone doesn't quite understand it, and if the Minister can read this back later so she doesn't quite understand it, which actually really highlights the connections between the budget, the economy, policy and communities, about people, about delivering for Tasmanians. So there's a review process. It's reviewing the rules, and there's a particular concern about a rule which is to expand the 60-pot area. So this letter reads, it was written on the 5th of May, it reads, the review process is of particular interest to Council as it has significant economic, social and environmental implications to Tasmania. The orthodox economic efficiency argument is at the expense of smaller operators. This inequitable approach benefits larger commercial fishing operators and is feared to have long-term impacts on the continued consolidation of these operators in the Tasmanian rock lobster fishery. It is of Breakaday Council's belief that in the absence of an economic and social analysis of the proposed rule and policy changes, a precautionary principle approach must be applied. As the discussion paper outlines on page 30, there are significant economic and social contributions local vessels offer to eastern Tasmania. It is easy to quantify some contributions. However, contributions such as sense of community and indirect economic impact are not considered. It is of our belief that the risks presented to the East Tasmanian economy have not been adequately considered. As such, we ask that the committee apply a precautionary principle approach to the proposed rule and policy changes when considering the economic and social risks to the east coast of Tasmania. The Breakaday Council's approach is underpinned by the belief that long-term impacts must be considered over short-term gain. Breakaday Council strongly opposes the proposed rule change of expanding the 60-pot area and requests an in-depth economic analysis of the proposal to be delivered before implementation. This proposal is a reactive and ill-advised response to the current market and does not consider long-term implications. This includes detrimental impact on the viability of smaller operators, as well as impact on local businesses such as slipways, the boilermakers, who all depend on these operators. The economic efficiency reasoning is not adequate to justify its implementation and is of clear inequitable benefit to the large operators at the expense of smaller operators. We expect this proposal will further consolidate quota and pots, forcing out smaller operators who cannot afford to increase their quota based on the size of their boat. The impact of such an occurrence would be detrimental to the Breakaday region's economy. Now, the East Coast is quite unique in terms of the rock lobster fishery, and I note with interest a number of responses that the Minister has made to questions in regard to regional communities and supporting communities through our fishery policy. I've asked a number of questions either through the upper house or the lower house in terms of the Minister's support for small family fishers, and she has said in her responses that she does support small family fishers. However, there are complex views to consider and diverse views. Well, I went to a really tight community ecosystem to consider the diverse views, an area where you can really clearly understand a case study for the implications of this rule change, and that's King Island. Again, might be of interest to the member in the chamber. Now, King Island, about 15 fishers on King Island. I've had the chance now of running through a list of ringing them all. I've almost called everybody, but I just wanted to share some of the comments that I've heard so far from 12 of the 15 fishers who all, without exception, don't support this rule change. And I want to just talk in, when we're linking in budget implications of policy changes that have an impact on our economy, have an impact on the people in our small communities, what this means. Something like the Rock Lobster Fishery, it's a tradition in Tasmania. It's been handed down in many cases through generations. It's as the former Minister might say, a Tassie way of life. And it can be said in no clearer terms than by talking to the fishers of King Island. And I'm just going to share some of the comments that they made. So, and without identifying anyone particularly, we bought a farm. We started out on our own. We fished with 4 or 5 other blokes. We got our sea time, and then we bought a boat. We worked it all up for ourselves, and now we've got a boat. We've bought in some units. I went away to school, got some work experience. 4 years in Burnie, got myself a trade, but then I decided that I missed the fishing, I missed the island. I got a job on a boat, I worked myself up, and now we're able to establish ourselves in the industry. So it's this cycle of people contributing, growing up, and then recontributing into their communities. What this rule change is going to do is make it hard for the next generation. I've been on the deck for a really long time. My grandfather used to fish this fishery. I'm worried that we're all going to get squeezed out. People are losing sight of the fact that we've got to start looking at the stocks, not just at people's back pockets. My dad used to say you can catch more fish with 2 20-pot boats than 1 40-pot boat. And that's because you're mindful of how you're set. You're mindful of the fish. What someone else said, and I didn't bring the rules with me, but the rules are about as thick as the budget. And there's this one rule just snuck in, and people, you know, they're feeling really done over by this. People's fathers, uncles, grandfathers have fished this fishery, and now their sons are fishing this fishery. But what's also interesting is that the families are supporting the life and supporting the community on the island. There are people that have got, as I said, some circumstances that dad's still fishing, they're fishing, and their son's fishing. And then their families are working on the island. We've got families that someone works in the local IGA or the local bakery. That's fairly standard. They might work and deliver the local beauty services, work in a farm, work in the cheese factory, but a lot of them work in the childcare centre, work at the school. They're nurse at the local medical centre, run the local real estate agency. You lose the fishery, you collapse this fishery on King Island, you will lose these vital services and these people, these families from generations from this community.